Before we begin, viewer discretion is strongly advised. The following is for educational and entertainment purposes only. This is the verbatim federal courtroom testimony of the Sean Diddy Combs trial, as reported by Inner City Press. The courtroom that morning felt like the inside of a pressure cooker, silent, airless, everyone waiting for the next clatter of evidence that might tip the scales. Judges, clerks, and seasoned journalists all shared the same worn-out expression, exhaustion threaded with morbid curiosity. Nobody suspected that a single figure could detonate the room. Yet, without a bailiff's call, or even the squeak of a hinge, the rear doors parted and Will Smith stepped through. Gasps ricocheted, notebooks snapped shut, and phones aimed skyward before security confiscated them once more. The judge's gavel twitched, but never fell. Even she seemed frozen to the bench. Will moved on his own steam. No entourage, no attorney whispering last-minute legalese. Just a man carrying an invisible avalanche on his shoulders. For months, his name had floated in rumor mills, like an unanchored buoy. Intriguing, unreachable, occasionally ominous. Court transcripts hinted at tapes too vile to release publicly. Commentators dissected grainy stills and anonymous quotes until the whole affair resembled a ghoulish guessing game. Through it all, Will kept silent. That silence ended the instant he asked the clerk for a Bible, raised his right hand, and swore to tell the truth. He was not there as a blockbuster king, not as the Fresh Prince, not as a meme revived each award season. He was a witness who had decided the price of secrecy outweighed the cost of exposure. The gallery braced itself, unprepared for the fuse he was about to light. He began calmly, voice low but unwavering. "I wasn't summoned," he said, letting every syllable hang. "I requested this." The sentence sliced through the stillness like a razor. From the defense table, Sean Diddy Combs, usually draped in smirk and swagger, shifted. His jaw tightened, one hand fidgeting with a cuff link that suddenly felt too tight. The man many called the architect of modern hip-hop, cool, now looked as though the ground might betray him. Will rolled back the clock to a single invitation. Hollywood's social calendar overflows with soirees, charity galas, premiere after-parties, brand dinners disguised as good causes. Most are harmless, some are decadent, a scant few are breeding grounds for nightmares. The message read like any other birthday bash. Will recalled, music, networking, familiar faces. I'd survived plenty. He arrived at a hilltop mansion big enough to eclipse distant city lights. Black SUVs dotted the driveway like chess pieces. Guards in identical suits operated metal wands, yet skipped the usual red carpet theatrics. No photographers, no branded step and repeat, just a swift confiscation of phones. Privacy, they claimed. In hindsight, Will said, it was the first iron bar of a cage he didn't yet realize he had entered. Inside, sonic waves of bass throbbed at an almost subconscious frequency, felt more than heard. The lighting, neither bright nor dim, seemed engineered to blur edges. Mirrors lined corridors, forcing guests into an unending hall of duplicated selves. Every smile, every anxious glance, multiplied. It felt as though the walls recorded you, he told the court. Drinks circulated, each glass identical, each refill unsolicited. After a polite amount of social lubrication, Diddy appeared. The host's grin, marketed for decades as proof of charm, now read like a proprietor welcoming new inventory. "Welcome to the family," came the greeting, equal parts warmth and possession. Will followed the producer through a narrow hallway veiled by velvet curtains, anticipating a swap of business cards or, at worst, a sales pitch. Instead, he stepped into choreography from a feverish mind. Performers, some instantly recognizable, others hauntingly young, moved in ways that blurred the boundary between dance and obedience. On low sofas sat onlookers, sipping, judging, recording mental footage. A camera's red standby light winked from the darkness. Diddy laughed, not drunkenly, not maniacally, just casually, as if cruelty were an inside joke. That was the moment, Will admitted, when his instinct screamed to leave. But the room's design offered no easy exit. Optics, reputation, sheer shock, each pinned him to the floor. Days later came the first reminder that escape was illusory. A block number called. "Hope you had fun, Fresh Prince," a voice whispered before disconnecting. He brushed it off until a plain manila envelope reached his production office. Inside, a single flash drive. Curiosity wrestled fear. Curiosity won. On screen, he saw his own face, eyes glazed, mouth open in a laugh he couldn't recall. Someone behind the lens, same unmistakable baritone, murmured, "That's how we keep him." In that second, Will grasped the game. Initiation through humiliation, blackmail disguised as belonging. He explained to the jury how invisible strings tightened thereafter. Suddenly, projects previously on the brink of green light status evaporated. Studio chiefs no longer returned calls. Tabloid sites, normally starved for confirmation, published oddly precise rumors. He was unstable, unfaithful, secretly closeted, anything to erode bankability. Diddy never needed to speak the threat aloud. The ecosystem did it for him. It was psychological warfare. Will stated, "I steady." Silence was the toll for peace. He described a luxury brand campaign from 2013, multi-continent billboards, seven-figure paychecks, months of negotiations, collapsed overnight. No explanation. 2 weeks later, another invitation to celebrate with Diddy slid across his manager's desk. Will declined again. The same week, a gossip blog dumped an avalanche of salacious headlines, each too specific to be accidental. Patterns emerged. Refusal bred punishment. Compliance bought temporary serenity. He didn't need a gun, Will said of Diddy. He had relationships. The actor shifted to the broader architecture of influence. According to him, Diddy existed at the nexus where music, film, tech, and politics traded favors. At a 2016 charity gala, Will witnessed CEOs, senators, and streaming platform execs shower the mogul with gratitude, as if he were their silent partner. One executive slipped Diddy a small USB, whispering, "Only you hold final cut." We'll never learn the contents, but its symbolism was unmistakable, gatekeeping authority over careers and narratives, and perhaps reputations far beyond music. Why stay silent? Will confessed his greatest dread was the unspoken blacklist. Blackballing isn't an email, he said. It's the door that doesn't open, the meeting that never materializes, the script that arrives then disappears. For years, he convinced himself survival required compliance. He leaned on box office numbers, public goodwill, and the comfort of an audience that remembered him as a charismatic hero. But each success felt counterfeit, forged on borrowed time. Then came whispers of secret audio. Will dismiss them until a former confidant delivered chilling news. His voice appeared on one of the tapes played behind closed doors. Panic, nausea, rage. Every emotion collided. Memories once filed away as fuzzy hangovers snapped into focus. He recognized the smell of that mansion's corridors, the taste of a drink he hadn't ordered, the sonic hum of sub-bass guiding the room's pulse. It was never just a party. It was programming, he declared. He reached the moment he called the prosecution. No publicist filtered the call. No attorney drafted statements. "I'm ready," he told investigators. Ready to detonate the myth that his silence equaled complicity. Ready to lose roles, partnerships, maybe his entire second act, but unwilling any longer to lose himself. The courtroom's back row leaned forward as he described hearing the tape. Only the judge, attorneys, and Will were present. Speakers crackled. Background chatter oozed through. A warped version of ambient jazz pulsed. Will's recorded laugh, hollow, distant, almost mechanical, echoed. Over that, Diddy's unmistakable timbre. That's how we break them in. Names, famous, powerful names, passed between unseen participants like contraband. What horrified Will most was not the content itself, but the memory it revived, the absolute certainty he'd been drugged, filmed, and archived as leverage. His voice tremored once, then resolidified. "There's a difference," he said, "between embarrassment and erasure of humanity. That tape erased something I didn't know could be taken." He acknowledged sleepless nights, panic attacks triggered by a mere mention of certain people, all of it a post-traumatic echo he'd misdiagnosed as ordinary anxiety. The jury listened, some wiping tears. Public reaction to his testimony shot through social media like voltage. Hashtags trended worldwide within minutes. Hashtag Will Speaks. Hashtag Diddy Files. Hashtag Freakoff Exposed. Clips of Will on the stand, wide-eyed, truthful, raw, outpaced streaming numbers of his own films. Hollywood scrambled. 2 endorsement deals evaporated within 24 hours. A studio postponed a blockbuster's marketing rollout. Crisis management firms dialed clients, advising them to express vague support for truth while ensuring their brand logos never appeared next to Diddy's. The same tastemakers who once celebrated the music mogul now rehearsed disclaimers. Inside the industry's fortified offices, panic spread. If Will possessed such damning testimony, who else might speak? Rumors said new subpoenas targeted label execs, distribution chiefs, even board members of conglomerates. Lawyers whispered about more footage, audio and visual, sealed for now, but lethal to reputations if leaked. One entertainment blogger described the climate as Chernobyl without the radiation suits. Will, meanwhile, retreated from the spotlight, not hiding, but healing. Friends said he spent afternoons with his children, evenings in therapy, mornings writing letters he might never send. On social platforms, he posted a single black and white image. 19-year-old Will on a sun-drenched set, carefree grin unscathed by betrayal. Caption, he didn't see it coming, but he made it. I'm proud of him. No hashtags, no callouts. The world answered with millions of hearts and confessions from survivors, particularly men, who finally felt permission to speak. Back in court, Diddy's defense scrambled to repaint Will as opportunist, a jilted star, a fading icon seeking relevance. Yet the argument wilted against the granularity of his details. Addresses, dates, names known only to inner circles. When prosecutors inquired whether we'll expected further retaliation. He nodded. They might release more footage. They'll say I'm broken. Let them. I'm protecting the truth, not an image. The judge granted Will a closing statement directed at the defendant. He stepped away from a microphone, bridging the space between witness stand and defense table until the entire room seemed to lean forward on one collective breath. You built an empire out of manipulation, he began. You called it success. You branded it as culture. You sold it as love. All you erected was a monument to fear. Diddy stared back, blinked twice, then zero. Will pulled from his pocket a glossy photo. Him in 2004. Tuxedo crisp, eyes bright, spirit untouched. This is who I was before your invitation, he said, lifting the photo for jurors to see. I haven't met this man in 2 decades. He pivoted to the jury. If you believe this ends with Cassie, with me, or with one night behind velvet drapes, you're missing the structure. This is a network of power fueled by silence. Dismantle it, or it evolves. Returning to Diddy, he delivered the final shard. You once bragged that nobody parties like you. Truth is, nobody lies like you. Without another glance, he gathered his belongings and strode through the same doors he'd entered, an exorcism completed in full view. The courtroom exhaled only after the latch clicked shut. Even the judge appeared rattled. Jurors dabbed eyes. Law clerks shuffled papers to disguise tears. And Diddy sat marble still, fingertips trembling. Outside, helicopters traced lazy circles, capturing the silhouette of a man neither victor nor martyr, but something more complicated, a survivor reclaiming authorship of his own narrative. When reporters shouted questions, he shook his head, murmuring, relief isn't accurate. It's just done. Yet beyond courthouse walls, the ordeal was only beginning for an industry used to laundering secrets through NDAs and private settlements. Executives convened emergency meetings, agents rewrote contingency clauses, and lawyers prepped clients for depositions. Internet sleuths unearthed footage once dismissed as gossip fodder. Diddy guiding young stars into back rooms, celebrities flinching when his name surfaced on red carpets, archival interviews where Will's smile faltered at the mere mention of the producer. Memes turned to manifestos, jokes hardened into indignation. Fans felt betrayed for cheering an actor who, behind the charisma, fought silent wars alone. If Will carried this for 20 years, one viral post read, how many others still bleed behind closed doors? By week's end, shareholder meetings at major labels buzzed with the phrase, reputational liability. Crisis PR teams drafted apologies preemptively, ready to distance brands from a legacy they had once paraded. Meanwhile, advocacy groups seized the momentum, demanding independent investigations and re-examinations of workplace culture inside music conglomerates. What began as a single testimony now threatened to uproot decades of accepted behavior. We'll watch the vortex swirl from a cautious distance. Industry friends offered safe houses, but he chose transparency, living openly, jogging at dawn, waving to neighbors. One source close to him said, he's learning peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's the refusal to dance with fear. Therapy sessions turned into strategy meetings with survivor networks, exploring ways to establish funds for artists coerced into silence. The man who once headlined blockbusters now plotted something far less glamorous, but infinitely more meaningful: collective emancipation. In closed-door discussions, prosecutors debated unsealing more evidence. If public pressure ballooned, they reasoned, jurors might require full context to grasp the breadth of manipulation. Diddy's attorneys threatened appeals, gag orders, smear campaigns, whatever might muddy waters. Yet each threat rang hollower after Will's crystalline account. You can't intimidate someone who has surrendered every lever you once used. Months later, when the verdict finally echoed through the packed chamber, details sealed here for subsequent legal appeals, the reaction paled beside the cultural shift already underway. The verdict mattered, but the revelation mattered more. Artists who'd once whispered behind stage curtains now published op-eds. Assistant directors who remembered confiscated phones wrote anonymous threads. The era of hush money faced extinction by 1,000 testimonies. As for Will, he chose not to bask in vindication. Instead, he released a brief statement, 4 sentences, 0 flourish, thanking the court for hearing him and urging anyone still trapped by fear to remember that truth delayed remains truth. He acknowledged the possibility his career might shrink, but insisted his life had finally expanded. The last image the public saw of him that season was a paparazzi photo, seated on a park bench at dusk, hoodie up, daughter's head on his shoulder, both watching pigeons scatter into a rosy sky. That picture traveled farther than any blockbuster poster ever had. It whispered the quiet triumph of reclaiming one's narrative after decades spent performing someone else's script.